All right, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining me. We'll go ahead and get started here. If you got your questions, go ahead and post them. It's going to be below the video. If you are on a smaller screen, if you're on a larger screen, it should be to the right of the video. So I start with questions that were asked up to an hour before. So looking at the screen here, looks like I'm going to be starting here with Brian P. But before I get to that, I'd like to answer a question that I get quite often from members, and that is, how do you stop pulling shots with your irons? Well, the biggest reason why I see people pull shots with irons is because they're not getting a proper weight shift to the lead side. So in order to not hit the ground behind the ball, they have to swing over the top, and that's going to lead to the pull shots. So let me kind of explain what's going on here. So I got my divot board here, and if you want to get one of these, after I answer the question here, I'll put a link in the chat. If you're watching this outside of the live office hours, we'll put a link in the email and the PS of the email in there. I'll tell the guys to put a link in there. So let's talk about what's going on when we swing with the ground contact, where we're hitting the ground with the club, when we swing from the inside and when we swing over the top. So if we're swinging from the inside, if you imagine a baseball field in front of me, I'm swinging out toward first base. If I keep my hips centered here, right, where is my club going to bottom out? It's going to bottom out back here, right? So you can see I'm swinging toward first base, and my club bottoms out behind here. Now imagine I'm swinging toward third base, so I'm coming over the top. Now if I keep my hips centered here, where's my ground contact going to be? It's going to be more forward, right? So if I hang back, right, if I hang back in my swing, I don't get a good weight shift to my lead side. I stay on my back foot. If I want to hit the ground, if I want to hit the ball and then the ground afterwards, I have to swing over the top in order to get to the ball, right? I have to. If I hang back, I have to go like this to be able to make ball first contact, because if I don't, if I swing from the inside and I'm hanging back, well, I'm going to hit way, way back here. So that's the biggest reason why I see people get that pull, is because they swing over the top, and they're swinging over the top. The root cause of that is because they're not getting to their lead side. So how do we fix this? How do we get to where we're making sure that we're getting to our lead side? So I just do a simple drill where I'll move this right here, where we go up to the top of the swing here. All right, so we're going to go up to the top of the swing. And now I'm going to shift my hips forward, right? Now, what I don't want you to do is shift your upper body forward. We're not going like this, because that's going to make you come over the top. I want you to go up to the top. You have your good spine angle at the top. We're angled away with our body. Then we're going to shift our hips forward. So I'm going to get my left hip, my outside hip, with my ankle here. And then I'm going to swing from the inside. I'm going to swing out to the right. I'm going to swing toward first base over there. And you can see when I did that, I got that ground contact to start. I don't know if you can see that on here. I got that ground contact to start right at the beginning of the ball there, and you can see my path is to the right. That's going to allow me to hit a nice draw when I do that, instead of that big pull. All right, so that's what we want to keep on doing. Now, if you're having trouble with this, if you're having trouble getting that path to work to the inside, what I'd recommend doing is maybe putting like an obstacle there. So some ideas where I actually have this box. So if I put this box kind of in the way, all right, so if I put this box a little in, I would use something like this. It's like an empty box. It's not going to hurt my club or anything. An impact bag would work really well. You could put a head cover in front, just something to give you some sort of obstacle to miss. So I'm going to set up here, right, and I'm going to go up to the top. I'm going to shift my hips to the lead side. Right? It's going to feel like you're sliding. What we have to understand is that there is lateral movement of the hips in the golf swing. The hips are not staying centered. I think that's where a lot of people go wrong with this. They get this mindset that our hips have to stay centered and turned. Well, if you do that, you're not going to get to your lead side, right? We have to have some lateral shift of the hips. If you go look at most tour players, you draw lines on the outside of their hips at address. What you're going to see is in the beginning of the backswing, they move into that trail line just a little bit. And then as they're getting up to the top, they start to move off of that line, and they move toward the lead line, the lead hip line. And then as they come into contact, basically the middle of their hips are on that lead hip line. So their hips have moved 4 to 6 inches forward. So that's one thing that we have to keep in mind with this is I think there's a preconceived notion out there that the hips are just staying centered throughout the swing. Well, if you do that, you're going to tend to fall back and you're going to have to swing over the top in order to get that. And that's going to lead to those pull shots. So if we want straighter, more powerful shots, we need to get that lateral shift to the lead side, and we need to swing from the inside as we're coming down. And putting an obstacle like this in the way really, really helps you to get that feeling like, okay, I need to miss this box and get top. You're pausing, shifting to the lead side, then swinging through, swinging from the inside. And then once you get comfortable with that, I try to do it in more of a fluid swing. So instead of pausing at the top, shifting forward, what I would do is I would do some really, really slow fluid swings where I'm going up to the top and I'm shifting forward as I'm getting up to the top and continuing to come all the way through. And keep working through that, going faster and faster and faster. And if you do that, you'll get rid of your pull shots very, very easily. But we have to get used to getting that weight shift to the lead side, because otherwise, when you swing from the inside, if you hang back, you're going to be hitting the ground way before the ball. It's usually better to pull the ball than it is to hit just like a big time chunk where the ball just dribbles, maybe 10 yards in front of you. So Brian P says, "Hi Q, what are your top tips for hitting fairway woods?" So the main issues I see of people who struggle with hitting fairway woods is they top or chunk them, or they just don't get them in the air very much. So if you're not getting them in the air very much, it's usually because of one of two reasons. One is that you may not have enough club head speed to hit a lower lofted fairway wood. So you may want to consider, if you're having trouble getting a 3-wood in the air, you just may not have enough speed to get up in the air. So maybe a higher lofted 3-wood, a high launch 3-wood, or a 5-wood, a 4-wood might be a better fit for you. The other reason, and this is the usual reason, is because we're hitting it very, very thin. We're hitting it on the lower part of the face. So the lower part of the face of a 3-wood actually has a little less loft. The faces are domed a little bit. So if you have a 3-wood that's 15 degrees, the lower part of the face might be 12 degrees, might be 13 degrees, lower loft. So that's going to be a little bit harder to get in the air. And then also when you hit it on the lower part of the face will actually gear down a little bit. It will twist down, which will also de-loft it. So when you hit it on the lower part of the face, it's just not going to get up in the air very, very much. And what that usually comes down to is, they're basically trying to sweep the ball or, not hitting down and through the ball, getting that strike higher on the face. It usually comes down to ball position. So people I often see, the biggest tip I can give them is they put the ball position too far forward, and then that leads to the tops, the chunks, and the really thin ones where the ball doesn't get up in the air. So that would be my top tip, is to check your ball position. If that sounds like some issues that you're having, is to check your ball position with the fairway wood. With a fairway wood, I would put the ball, if we have our good spine angle here and our good setup, we're 6 to 8 degrees angled away with our spine. If I take my club and put it right on my earlobe and then drop it straight down, one ball forward of that is usually a pretty good ball position with a fairway wood. So again, if I kind of set up here, this would kind of be my ball position with a fairway wood. If I set up like this, drop it straight down, push it out, and that's one ball forward of that, that's typically going to be a good ball position. What I see a lot of people doing is they have that ball position similar to what they would with a driver, because they see the fairway wood right. It just seems logical. Hey, I'm going to play this as a wood. I'm going to play this the same way I would off my driver. Well, with the driver, the ball is teed up, right? So the ground's not in the way. You can get underneath the ball, right? You can swing underneath the ball and hit up into it. But when you're hitting a fairway wood, you're usually hitting it off of the ground. The ground's in the way. You have to hit down on it a little bit. And the way that you do that is make sure that your ball position is not too far forward. If it's too far forward, you're going to tend to thin it, top it, chunk it because the ground's in the way. So that's my best tip that I would say. The fairway is the most often mistake that I see. All right, so let's keep going here. All right, so David K says, what is your opinion of in-round adjustments and changes? What amount is appropriate? What should be avoided? Yeah, so you should be making adjustments throughout the round. Our feel is constantly changing, right? So, sometimes, I don't play as much anymore. So I actually get somewhat fatigued toward the end of the round and my swing starts breaking down. I start to overdraw the ball a little bit. So I need to be more aware of that, later on in the round when I get a little bit tired. So that I actually try to, to kind of compensate for that. A lot of times I'll actually try to hit a fade to compensate in order to not overdraw the ball. So I'll try to make sure that I'm feeling like the face is coming in more open. I'm staying down and through the ball a little bit more. So that's my personal opinion. But like I said, if you're out on the course and you're starting to overdraw the ball, overfade the ball, you're chunking the ball, you have to make an adjustment. Otherwise, you're just going to keep doing that, right? So you may want to think, if you hit a couple off the toe, right, in a row, then you may want to be thinking, okay, I want to try to hit this one a little more off the heel, just try to get it in the center of the face. If you chunk a couple in a row, right, you may want to think, okay, I want to get to my lead side a little bit more to get that ball first contact, right? If I'm hooking the ball, I may want to feel like I'm fading the next one to try to hit it a little bit more straight, right? If I'm, it's endless. So I absolutely think you need to do that. What should be avoided would be things that just aren't necessary, right? So let's say you're playing around and your buddy's talking about this thing that he's doing in his swing, and then you decide, well, I'm going to start doing that in my swing. Well, it's not necessary. It needs to be directly related to the ball flight contact issues that you're having within your round presently at that moment. So if it's not, it could make you have ball flight contact issues. So basically the things that should be avoided would be the things that make you play worse, right? That don't improve your ball flight or contact. So that's what I would recommend doing. But yeah, you absolutely need to adjust. And what you can do, it's a skill to learn to do that, to learn to adjust your feel to get the desired result that you want. It happens with experience, how much you actually do it. You're going to have a good idea how much you need to exaggerate it the more that you do it. But you may be in a situation where it's hard to trust. You're exaggerating it. You're so far off that it's hard to exaggerate something because what you're actually trying to do would lead to a bad result, right? But the reality is that you're more than likely that's not what's going to happen. So, for example, let's say you just one day you just have a wicked slice going, right? Well, that means that you're coming down, most likely coming down over the top, coming down steep, and the face is open. So you need to feel like you're probably hitting a hook, a big snap hook, to get that, and that can be difficult to trust. So you can try to do it a little bit at first, right, to see if that just tones it down a little bit. And maybe you get just a little bit of a fade that time. And then the next time you think, well, I'm going to exaggerate it a little bit more here to try to straighten it out. So it's a skill to learn that, and it just comes through experience. But yes, you absolutely should be making adjustments in the round because it doesn't make any sense to go, like if you're chunking shots, it doesn't make any sense to go out there and chunk every single shot, right? You have to make an adjustment. It's like the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result, right? That's kind of the same thing. You have to make an adjustment. You have to do something different if you want the result to be different. So yes, absolutely all for making adjustments. Excuse me. So Matthew says, good morning, Q. When you want to draw or fade a shot, what are your setups, club, grip, etc.? Thanks. So yeah, if I'm trying to set up to hit a draw, I'm gonna put this alignment stick down just to basically be where the target line would be. So if I'm trying to hit a draw, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up my body a little bit more close. So I'm going to set up my body to be aiming a little bit more right of the target. All right. So if this is my target line, I'm going to be setting up my body to where I'm a little bit closed off. I'm a little bit aiming to the right. And the more I want to draw it, the more curvature I want to put on the ball, the more I'm going to close myself off. Right. So if I'm just trying to hit a little baby draw, right, I'm not going to close myself off very much, right? Then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to strengthen my grip a little bit. I'm going to point my face a little bit more toward the target, right? So if I set up my face with my body, it'd be aiming to the right. So I'm just going to strengthen my grip a little bit to get that face a little bit more closed, right? And that's setting me up to hit my draw. And when I take my swing, all I'm going to do is I'm going to swing along my body like I normally would. My face is going to be a little bit close to my path, so that's going to get that ball to draw to the left. Now for a fade, I'm going to do the same thing. All right, for a fade, this is my target line. I'm going to set it with my body a little bit open, right? The more I want to fade it, the more open I'm going to get, right? Because that's going to get my face open to the path, right? So if I'm trying to hit a fade, I'm going to set up open, and I'm going to set up with my face a little bit open to my body. So I'm going to be weakening my grip. So that gets my face open to my body, and that allows me to get that ball to fade to the right. I'm going to just swing along my body here. The key is not to swing. If you can't open up your body and then swing along your target line, because that's not going to get your face open to the path. For a draw, you need to get the face closed to the path of the club. And for a fade, you need to get the face open to the path of the club. One other thing I'd mention is that when I'm hitting a draw, if you have a heel or a toe bias on the face, so let's say you generally hit a lot of shots off the toe, or if you're hitting a lot of shots off the heel, if you're attempting to hit a draw and you hit it off the heel, it's more than likely not going to draw because of something called gear effect. So when you hit the ball on the heel, the ball will tend to want to fade more or draw less. So if you're someone who generally hits the ball in the heel and you're trying to hit a draw, I would try to favor the toe of the club to be able to get the ball to draw a little bit. Same thing if you're trying to hit a fade and you are a little bit toe biased, you generally hit the ball off the toe a little bit. That's where your miss is. I would try to favor the heel a little bit to make sure that ball fades. So just a couple other tips there, but it's really as simple as getting the face close to the path or open to the path. And there's lots of ways to do it. I think the easiest way is to set up your body in the certain directions, right? And then swing along your body, and then have the face control the face by strengthening or weakening the grip. But like I said, there's lots of ways that you can do it. You can set up with everything dead square and just try to swing the club more from the inside and with a closed face in order to hit your draw. And you could just try to swing a little bit more steeply with an open face to hit your fade. You know, there's lots of ways to do it, but the way I like to do it is just to set up my body, swing along my body, strengthen or weaken the grip to get the face going, and then kind of favor one side of the club or the other to make sure that I get the curvature that I want. All right, so let's keep going. So Tom C says, I'm curious where swing speed comes from. How much from the arms, how much from unhinging of the wrists, and how much from the lower body, etc. I've read that rotating the hips quickly helps whip the club through impact, but I've also read that 75% of the power comes from the wrists. All confusing and conflicting. I asked because it would help me to know what the most important thing to work on is. So good question. So basically, if you think about it this way, let's say you swing 100 miles per hour, right? If I take this club and I go like this, right? I don't do any arm movements, and it's just my wrists, right? So I'm just going from here and going like that as fast as I can. That's not going to be 75 miles per hour. So there's no way 75% of your club head speed comes from your wrists. So that would mean that if that was true, that would mean that this going like that would get you 75 miles per hour. It's just not going to happen. I don't know how fast that would be, but if I had to guess, it's probably 40, 50 miles per hour is where that comes from, the wrists. So I could see maybe 40, 50%. Now, I don't know the exact percentages of where speed comes from. And and I would venture to say that it's probably those percentages are probably going to be different from person to person, right? Some people are probably going to get a little bit more from shoulder turn. Some people might get a little bit more from wrist turn and things like that. But what I will say is that most of your club head speed is going to come from your arms and your wrists, right? So if you imagine this, if it, let's say I swing 100 miles per hour with everything, right, using my hips and using everything. If I just take this club, right, and I don't turn my shoulders at all, and I just bring my arms up like this, right, and I cock my wrists, I could probably get pretty close to 75% or 80%. Right. So I would say 75, 80% is coming from your arms moving in your shoulder socket, right, and your wrists, right? That's what I would say where most of it comes from. A lot of it is going to come from your hip and your shoulder turn as well. But what I will say, when I see people get the most gains, it's not from working on the wrist motion. Almost, I can't say I've ever seen a player not cock their wrists. Right, almost every single golfer that I've ever worked with does this in the golf swing. So I've never seen a player do this, right, and just turn their body and turn their shoulders. So that's more than likely not something you need to work on, is getting the wrist to move. Most people, when they're struggling with club head speed, is because they're hindering their wrists, right? So they're not, or not the wrists, their hips. They're not turning their hips, or they're not turning their shoulders. Most of the time it's the hips, and that kind of goes up to the shoulders. If I don't turn my hips, I can only turn my shoulders about that much. Now I turn my hips, now I can turn my shoulders a lot more. So that's really the number one piece that I see where people really, really struggle. Just as an example, we've had a few people actually come to the distance clinic and not really turn their hips and their shoulders and gain 20 miles per hour just like that, just from turning their hips and their shoulders. So one fellow that comes to mind, he swung the club like this. So he maybe turned his shoulders or turned his hips, maybe 10 degrees, and his shoulders maybe turned, 45 degrees like this. And he was swinging 82 miles per hour with his driver. Then we got him to unlock his hips, and that got his shoulders to turn more. And it was more in this area, and he swung over 100 miles per hour. So it was 20 miles per hour gain in basically, 10 seconds, very, very, very quickly. So that would be the number one place where I would see people struggle the most. But I would say, hey, if you're not cocking your wrists at all, then the wrist would probably be the place where you could get a lot of speed. But I would venture to say that's probably not what's going on. You're probably cocking your wrist quite a bit. Usually it's the hips that are being hindered. But even that, that guy, he gained 20 miles per hour, right? So that was a fifth of his speed. 20% of his speed came from not turning his hips for the most part, right? So the hips don't provide all the speed, right? But it helps you it's the number one thing that I see people restrict to hinder them from getting the speed. Almost everyone I see gets their arm and their wrists moving to get speed. It's the hips and the shoulders that really that we see hindered, but those aren't. But that's not the number one place where speed comes from. The number one place where speed comes from is the arms in the wrists. It's going to be 75, 80% of your speed. But the wrists are definitely not 75%. The wrists by themselves, you have to have the arms swing back, and the wrist. That's where 75, 80% is going to come from. All right, so Tom C goes on to say, comment, been working on the 20-minute distance fix with limited success. Seems like I hit the ball about as far with the driver when the backswing gets to parallel, then letting it rip in the forward swing. Seems like I hit the ball about as far with the driver when the backswing gets parallel, and then letting it rip in the forward swing. As opposed to what, I guess, is a question. Going short of parallel. Yeah, I mean, you may be sequencing a little bit differently with a longer swing. So learning to sequence a little bit better with the longer swing will help you to get more speed. So looking at the other pieces, but there's also a point in diminishing returns, right? If you there's a point where you just can't sequence from a certain position to get any more speed. So that could be something that could be going on as well. All right. So Greg H says, "Hi Q, can you please take us through the downswing, showing us at the point the first move should be, and then sequence of other moves and squatting, hip turn, club in the slot, etc." Sorry for the mixed up message. So you just want me to go over the entire downswing? I'm not going to go over the entire downswing. If you have a specific question about a point in the downswing, I'll be happy to do that. But I could sit here the whole entire office hours and talk about the entire downswing. So, in an effort to answer everybody's questions, let me know if there's a specific point. To talk about what starts the downswing is pressure in the lead foot. We need to be getting pressure into that lead foot, pressure into the ground, into that lead foot. That's what starts the downswing. That's what you want to get in there first before anything starts coming down. So if that's not something that you're doing, then I would recommend working on the step drill. The step drill from the 20-minute distance fix would be a good one. But if you have any other specific questions about the downswing, I can't go over such a broad topic like that because it would take the entire time. But the step drill, the sumo step drill from the 20-minute distance fix is what I would recommend. Click the instruction tab, then click the top speed golf system. It's in week 1. So John A says, can I use the Mo Norman single plane swing? Excuse me, with your instruction, 20-minute distance fix. I'm an All Access member, just joined today. I'm also signed up as a gold member of the Graves Golf Academy. Yes, Mo Norman's swing falls into the, he does the top speed golf system. He's doing all the pieces of the top speed golf system. But what I will say is I would recommend doing one system and not mixing up a bunch of stuff, because there are probably, I'm not familiar. I know what Graves is, but I don't know what exactly I haven't been on their website to like see exactly what's on there, but I'm sure there are things that work specifically that they want you to do that work specifically for that swing. And if you're mixing that with a bunch of other stuff, they may not match up correctly. So that's why I don't recommend doing that. I recommend going to one thing. The other thing is, the other reason to do that is to not get analysis paralysis. If you have one guy talking in this ear and another guy talking in this ear, you're just going to get all jumbled up. You're trying to do too much. So what I'd recommend doing is sticking to one and going with that. But what I will say is that there's a lot of different ways to swing the golf club, and the top speed golf system allows you to do all of those ways. The top speed golf system is just telling you what the 5 things are that all of the players do, all of the good players do. So Mo Norman, Bryson DeChambeau, Tiger Woods, all of these players, they all do these things. So that's what it comes down to. Is it's the Pareto principle, which means that 80% of your results are going to come from, most of your results are going to come from a small amount of things. And that's what the top speed golf system is. It's those 5 small amount of things where most of your results are going to come from, right? Whereas the Graves, the single plane swing, it puts you into where you have to do these one things, right? This one thing that's going to change everything, and that's not really, what's happening. But what I will say, Mo Norman is doing the top speed golf system. He's just doing it with other parameters in there, such as single plane and probably some other things that Graves wants you to do. Not that you can't be successful doing that. I'm just saying that I would choose one over the other. But if you choose top speed golf, then you're able to, you can do what fits best for you within our parameters, which are what all good players do. All right. So Jay Bernthal, and just a heads up, your email's on here. So We're all friends here, but I would hate for somebody to get a hold of your email and something to happen. So if you want to get your email off of there, you can just select that icon in the lower left-hand corner of the chat window. That will log you out of the chat. And then if you click back in to write a message, it prompts you to put in your first name, last initial. So that way your name isn't on there. But anyway, Jay Bernthal asks, there is advice that you need to be shifting your weight to the left before you finish your backswing. How does this square with trying to make your backswing as long as possible? So, yes, you need to be shifting pressure. The better players shift pressure into their lead foot before they reach the top of the swing. So if we're looking at it this way, right, if I'm going up to the top of the swing, I'm loading up right away. So I'm building my swing. And then as I get into this area of my backswing, I'm starting to shift pressure to my lead side, but I'm still continuing with my backswing. My backswing hasn't stopped. So the problem that I see most people have is they're separating the backswing and the downswing as two separate movements. But there's a transition, right? And in that transition, that's when we're shifting pressure to the lead foot while we're also continuing the backswing, right? So I would say the backswing is this, right? I'm fully loaded up right here. This was one thing. And then here's my transition where I'm going to start to be shifting pressure from my trail foot to my lead foot as I'm finishing my backswing. And then my downswing is starting in there as I'm starting the club down and I'm continuing to apply pressure in the downswing. So that transition area where the club is changing directions, right? We want to be shifting pressure into that lead foot. The best way to get the feeling for that is the step drill that I talked about earlier. So that's starting with your feet together, starting this club going back as you're going forward. So you see I'm shifting pressure forward as I'm going up to the top. And that's going to help you get that feeling. So that's a sumo step drill from the 20-minute distance fix. If you want to check that out, click the instruction tab, then click the 20-minute distance fix, and you'll see it's in the week 1 drills there. All right, so Jim F says, morning Q, are push fades and pull draws a swing plane issue or a timing on rotation? A push fade is more about the face. So if you're hitting a push fade, that means that you're, well, not necessarily. Usually if you're hitting, so if I'm defining what a push fade is, a push fade to me is a ball, if you're a right-handed golfer, is a ball that starts to the right and then has a moderate amount of curvature from left to right, even though it's starting to the right. So what you would want to do is get the face more closed to get a little bit of a draw, to get a push draw, a ball that starts to the right of the target and then curves back to the target. So I would say that a push fade would be a face issue, right? You're not getting the club, you're getting the club face too open, so you need to get that club face more closed. But there could be lots of reasons why you're not getting the face. It could be timing of rotation. It could be that you're leaving the face open at the top. It could be that you have your grip is too weak. There's lots of reasons for that. And the same thing for a pull draw. If I'm saying a pull draw, that's from the path being out to in, right? And the face being a little bit close to that path. So the ball starts left and then has a small amount of curvature from right to left when it starts left. So that means that more than likely means that your path is left and your face is a little bit close to the path. So your face is too close. So maybe your grip is too strong. Maybe you're keeping the club face too close. You could be flipping as you're coming into contact to get that club face closed. Right. So there's lots. It's not just timing on rotation. That's the issue. It's not necessarily a plane issue. If that's the desire, if you're trying to hit a fade, then and you're hitting a pull draw, then it's not a plane issue. You have the correct plane. You just have the wrong face, right? If you're trying to hit a draw and you're getting push fades, again, that's not a path, a plane issue. You're swinging on the right plane to hit a draw. You're just not controlling the face the correct way. So I would venture to say it probably has more to do with the face than anything else. So Karen E says, hi Q. With putting, I noticed that if the green is flat, when I feel here the sweet spot, then I feel here the sweet spot. If it's either uphill or downhill, then I feel here a clunk. How to correct? Do I need to adjust angle of putter? More than likely not. I just practice hitting putts on uphill and downhill lies, and I would use something called a gate drill, where you put a tee on outside. So if you imagine this is a putter, I'm going to put a tee in the ground right here, just outside of this side, and another tee just outside of that side. And I'm going to practice hitting shots, getting it between those tees, hitting the ball between those tees. So that's what I would recommend doing, and just get more comfortable hitting on uphill and downhill lies. John A says, what happened? Q is frozen. My guess, doesn't look like I'm having any issues on my end, so I'd imagine you might have a little bit of internet slowdown, or maybe mine slowed down randomly. But yeah, check your connection if you're getting if it's getting frozen. It could be an issue with YouTube as well. But sorry for the inconvenience there, John. So Jeff G says, hi Q. I get double hits on chips too regularly. What's responsible for double like that? How do I stop them? You're probably hitting the ground before the ball. So if you hit the ground, that's going to really slow down the club, right? So let's say I'm coming in, right? And I'm coming in, here's my ball, and I'm coming in, I'm hitting the ground here. That's going to really slow down my club. Then I hit the ball, my club's not continuing to go through. It's going basically the same speed as the ball, and then I end up with the double hit. So you just got to make sure that you're making ball first contact. That will get rid of the double hits. The double hits come from hitting the ground before the ball, slowing down the club, so that way it can't move past the ball, or that way the ball can move out in front of the head, basically. So make sure you're making ball first contact, and that will get rid of the double hits. Get your body forward, maybe move the ball. Oh, I just realized you probably couldn't see that. Sorry about that. So just to go back to what I was saying, because I just realized you couldn't see that. If you're getting the double hit, it's because you're hitting the ground before the ball, right? And then you're coming in and you're not hitting the ball with enough force to get it moving, right? It's moving at basically the same speed as the club now, instead of really firing off of the face. So when that happens, you'll end up with those double hits. So what you want to make sure that you're doing is you're making ball first contact, so that way that ball can jump off the face and not have a chance to be double hit. So in order to do that, I check your ball position, right? So I try to have the ball position more in the middle, or even slightly back in the stance. Have your body more forward, have your weight more forward on this lead foot, and have those hands a little bit more forward as well. So that way you can kind of get a descending blow and make ball first contact. For more chipping technique tips, I'd recommend checking out our chipping mastery course. If you want to check that out, that's going to be on the homepage. So click the house icon, which at the top, that'll take you to the homepage. Scroll down on the homepage, you'll see a list of all the courses there, and then select the chipping mastery course to work on more chipping technique and drills. Mauricio R says, at the end of the backswing and beginning of the downswing, the hips and shoulder should move laterally the same distance. If I move the hips and not the shoulder, the spine angle will increase and I will end up hitting the ground first. Is that correct? Yeah, it's roughly the same. It might be slightly more the hips, but it's roughly the same. Yes, we don't want to go up to the top of the swing and then go like this, right? We go up to the top of the swing and they're both moving forward about the same amount. The hips can move a little bit more in front, but it's going to be about the same amount. Otherwise, yeah, you may hang back and chili dip it, hit those chunk shots. So Tom C says, why does a draw roll more than a fade? For a couple of reasons. One, when you hit a draw, you're closing the face to the path, right? So the direction my club face is pointing at impact is close to the direction the club head is moving. So typically I'm going to be swinging a little bit into out. and I'm going to have my face a little bit closed to the path. When you close the face, that de-lofts the face. And that does a couple things. One, that's going to make the ball launch lower, right? So your angle of descent when it hits the ground is going to be flatter, which is going to make it roll more. And then two, when you de-loft the club, it has less spin, right? The same reason why when you hit a wedge, it has more spin than a driver does, right? A driver has a lot less loft. There's not going to be, you're talking 2,000s of RPMs of spin. And then when you hit a wedge, there could be 10,000 RPMs of spin. So big difference there and that's because of the loft of the club. So when you de-loft the club, it's going to lower the spin, which is also going to make it roll out more. So that's really what's going on. The angle of descent and the spin is lower, is flatter and lower with a draw shot. And with a fade shot, typically it's going to be higher because when you hit a fade, you open the face to the path, right, which adds loft. That gets the ball higher up in the air, which makes the angle of descent steeper, which means it won't roll out more. And it will have more spin, right, which means it won't roll out more as well because you're adding that loft. So Ingo S says, I have trouble shifting my weight. On the top of the backswing, I try to have my upper body sort of falling or leaning to the left side. What is your initial move to the left side? And at what point do you get your left shoulder down? Well, the left shoulder is going to be down at the top of the swing, right? So if I'm going up to the top of the swing, I'm turning my shoulders. My left shoulder is starting to move down right in the very beginning. Right? So here I am at address. As soon as I start my swing, my left shoulder is moving down. And then as I start my downswing, it starts to move down even more. And then it starts to move up. And then as far as how do I get pressure to my lead foot, I have to do it with my trail foot, right? I have to use the ground with my feet in order to shift pressure. You can't move things out of thin air, right? If you imagine a feather like going through the air, it doesn't have any way to leverage itself to move in any direction. It's just going wherever the wind blows it, right? Well, it's the same thing in the golf swing. I can't pull things out of thin air. I have to use the ground. My connection with anything to create force is with the ground. So I have to use the ground to do that. So that's pushing off of my trail side with my trail foot to get to my lead foot. It's this, right? That's the feeling that you want to have. And that's why the step drill is a great drill that I was talking about earlier, because it isolates that. So in that step drill, what we're doing is we're starting with our feet together. And as soon as we start this backswing, I'm lifting up my foot. So now all of my ground force is in this trail foot. So it's isolating that. In the actual swing, that's not what's going on, right? Both of my feet are on the ground. So there's ground force in both. But I want to be really increasing this ground force in this trail foot, this pressure that I'm putting into the ground with my trail foot. So as I'm going up to the top, I'm really driving to that trail, off of that trail leg into that lead leg. So I'd recommend to get that proper feeling, do that step drill. That's a really good one to get that feeling. To get to the step drill, click the instruction tab at the top. That will take you, or that'll expand a menu, and then go to the 20-minute distance fix. It's week 1 of the 20-minute distance fix where Clay talks about that step drill. So Brian B, and just a heads up, Brian B, about the email. Your email's on there. So just for cybersecurity reasons, I'd recommend taking it off of there. And the way that you do that is by logging out of the chat, selecting that icon in the lower left-hand corner of the chat window, and logging out of the chat, and then clicking back in to get it off there. And when you click back in, I'd put in your first name, last initial, just put like Brian B. All right, so Brian B says, working on assignment stick compression drill to get the feel of releasing the club later. Any tips for the correct feel and with the right hand in the drill in the full swing? What I'd recommend is the pet the grass drill from, I'm not sure exactly what drill you're talking about, the working on alignment stick compression drill. What I'd recommend is the straight line release course, the drills that are in there. That's going to help you to get the right feel. And specifically the pet the grass drill. That's a good one to get the proper feeling there. So to get to the straight line release course, click the instruction tab, then the Tasman Golf System, then the straight line release. and that Pet the Grass drill is in there. One thing to keep in mind about feel is relative. So I can't really tell you what you were. I can't really give you an idea of what you need to feel without seeing your swing. All right. So for example, let's say if you were coming down and you looked like this at impact, you got a great release, right? Let's say it looked like that. Well, it wouldn't be good for you to feel like you weren't releasing the club at all, because you would likely not release the club at all. But if you're someone who's coming in and you're flipping, you're kind of going like this, right? Well, you need to feel like you're not releasing the club at all to get it to look the way that you want to, right? So feel is relative. What you need to feel, what I need to feel, what Bob needs to feel, they're going to be completely different things. There's no way for me to really tell you what you need to feel. So what you have to do is you have to adjust your feel to get the desired result that you want. That's what you have to do, is adjust your feel to get the desired result that you want. What that means is whatever you're seeing, right? If you're feeling, let's say you're coming into contact, right, and you feel like you have a great release, everything feels natural and good, but it's not the way that you want to feel, you want to exaggerate the opposite. So if you're releasing the club too early, and that's what you do naturally, then you need to feel like the club's not releasing at all, right? That you're keeping those wrist angles, you're not releasing the club at all to get to where you just release it a little bit. And then what I would try to feel like is that you can't overdo it, right? You can't overdo it. If you do, you can very easily just ease off of it. So that's what I would try to have the mindset of, is that you can't overdo it. And if you do, just ease off of it. So Andy Ortiz says, the video on section stable fluid spine on 1.3 divide center drill regarding the tilted position setup. The question is if this position applies also with wedges, sand pitching, or only to 6-iron, thanks in advance. You may be slightly more upright for a shorter club, only because the stance and the stance is usually a little bit narrower. You're typically going to hit a little bit steeper on those shots. But generally, it's going to apply to all clubs. You're still going to have some spine angle away, even if you're hitting a wedge, unless you're trying to really chop down into it. But for a stock shot, yeah, it's going to be mostly the same, but it could be slightly, very, very slightly more vertical. So John A says, Graves models their swing off of Mo Norman. They try to duplicate Mo Norman's swing. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. I know that. I'm just saying that the top speed golf system is modeled off of all of the best players, all of them, every single one of them. There is not a single major winner that is not doing the top speed golf system, not a single one. Whereas the Gray system, it's modeled after one player, the way one player swings. So you can see what I mean by that is you're getting put in a box where you have to swing this way, and that's not what top speed golf believes. Top speed golf believes you can be successful swinging like Mo Norman, Dustin Johnson, Angel Cabrera, Lee Westwood, Jordan Spieth, Tiger Woods, Adam Scott, Jim Furyk. All of these players are doing the top speed golf system. These are the most important things in the golf swing to do. Mo Norman's doing all of those things as well, but he's also doing specific things that may not be the best thing for you to do. Those were the best things for Mo to do, but not necessarily for you. So I don't like to put players into a box where they have to swing one certain way. That's it. There's certain things that are really important in the golf swing. If you have those down, right, then everything else is kind of like your own swing signature, right? So hopefully that makes sense. All right, so Roger Darter says, my sim driver has adjustable loft 10.5 degrees plus minus 2. I was thinking of experimenting with lower loft to get more distance. What the downside of lower loft? Is there a minimum club head speed for it to be effective? Yeah, so the downside of it is not getting the ball up in the air enough and too low a spin. So if you don't have a lot of club head speed and there's no you would really need to get fitted to know exactly what loft you need to have. But if you don't have enough spin on your driver, it can be very difficult to control. Because if you imagine it this way, let's say you're spinning you have a lot of club head speed, right? and you lower your loft, so so that way you can hit the ball further, right? Well, you are going to hit the ball further, but that lower spin is going to make it a lot more difficult to control. So the more spin a ball has, the more stable it's going to be, right? The more backspin it has. So the more backspin it has, the less or the more resistant the swing axis is going to be, or the spin axis is going to be to tilting, right? So if I that's why wedges. Here's a good example. Wedges are much more difficult to draw and fade. The reason for that is because of the loft adds a lot of spin, and that spin makes the spin axis more stable and more resistant to tilting. And that tilting is what makes the ball curve, right? So if I'm only spinning my driver at like 1,200 RPMs a spin, then excuse me, then I'm going to have a hard time controlling that, because it's just the smallest amount of anything. I get a little puff of wind, and that ball is going to really want to go off course, right? So that's, that's not going to be most people that are going to struggle with that, but that would be a downside to that. The main downside is just not getting it up in the air. If you don't have enough club head speed, if you think about it in an extreme sense, imagine you had a 2-degree driver, right? You wouldn't hit that very far, because it's just not going to get up in the air. So that's what the downside is. If you don't hit up on the ball enough, and you don't have enough speed, then the lower loft is going to be difficult for you. But then if you have a lot of speed and you lower the loft too much, the spin will be too low, and you'll have a hard time controlling it. So you have to find the happy medium. And the only way to really find that is, now you can do it through kind of trial and error with what you're working on, with what you're talking about. But the way to really know is to get on a launch monitor. Test different heads, different lofts, different shafts, different things to find what exactly works best for you. But I understand that may not be something that's available to you. So you might be in the trial and error phase. And the other thing is, like, if you play in conditions that are really soft and plush and you need more carry, less loft is not necessarily going to make you hit the ball farther. It may make you hit the ball shorter. But if you play somewhere like Texas, where it's firm, it's hard, it's windy, it may be more beneficial for you, not only from a distance perspective, but from a control perspective, to have that lower loft to keep it out of the wind a little bit. So a lot of it depends on the conditions that you play in the most as well. That's why when you see when players go to the pros, when they play in the Open Championship, a lot of them put like a 2-iron in the bag, and take like their hybrid out, and they put like a 2-iron in the bag, because irons are going to launch lower than hybrids, and they want a ball that they want something they can get on the ground and running, whereas a hybrid is something that's going to get up in the air. It doesn't work as well in windy conditions. It's going to tend to want to launch up higher and have some spin. But that's better if you're playing in the normal conditions that they're playing in, like in the United States, where it's softer. They want something that they can carry somewhere and stop. All right. So Brian B., sorry about my email showing. Oh, no worries. I just don't. Just for your own cybersecurity, I was just trying to help. It doesn't make any difference to me one or another if you have your email on there. I just don't want. I know we're all friends here, but I'd hate for somebody to take your email and do something with it. All right. So Gary P. says, using the driver, I'm having trouble with moving my head towards the target on the downswing. Any suggestions? Yeah, you have to push off with the trail foot, right? So go up to the top, and you have to push your whole entire body toward the target with your trail foot. So the step drill is a good one for that. So starting with your feet together. I mentioned this step drill a lot today, but start with those feet together. Start pushing toward that lead side right away. You can find that step drill in the it's a sumo step drill in the 20-minute distance fix. Click the instruction tab, then the 20-minute distance fix. It's in week 1. I believe it's the second drill in week 1. So Tom C says, this may not have a simple answer, but I swing my stiff flex driver at about 100 miles per hour. Would moving to a regular flex increase club head speed noticeably, but may result in more variation in accuracy? Most likely, yeah. So the more flex you have in the shaft, typically the more speed you're going to get because it's going to have more whip. Now, it could kick at the wrong time and not necessarily give you that added boost. But typically, there's going to be more variable because there's more flex happening in the shaft, right? So you want to find that happy medium, right? That gives you, that gives you stiff enough that you have control, but has enough whip in it that it's not so stiff that you're not getting any of that whip out of it. So you got to have that happy medium. And as I mentioned before, the only way to find what works best or what's going to work you the best way is just to get professionally fitted, find a reputable fitter, and have them fit you. That's really the best way. And one thing to keep in mind as well, Tom, is that not all stiff shafts are the same and not all regular flex shafts are the same. One company or one product line from a company's regular flex shaft could be stiffer than another company's stiff flex shaft, right? So there's no, as far as I know, there's no rules, that they have to, this range has to fall, it has to be stiff or whatever. They can call it whatever they want. So keep that in mind, if you're getting fitted or something like that. All right. So Brian B says, you just mentioned pushing off your left foot to get the weight shift. It'd be the right foot if you're right-handed. Does it matter if you push with the trail foot or feel like you need to step lead foot as long as you make the weight shift? Let me read that again. Does it matter if you push off with the trail foot or feel like you step to lead foot as long as you make the weight shift? Well, that's the only way it's going to get there. It's not the only way that you can get pressure into your lead side is if you push off from your trail side. That's the only way it's going to happen, unless you just lift your foot off the ground, right? So if I'm standing like this, and again, to get my center of mass over my foot so I don't fall over, because I can get more pressure in my lead foot if I just lift up my foot, but I'm going to fall over if I do that, right? So I have to, in order to not fall over and be in balance, I have to push some off my trail foot and to get all my pressure in my lead foot. So yeah, the only way to get there is to push off of your trail foot. That's what you have to do. So Larry R says, being a left-handed hard rocker, CE 69, playing right-handed, how much forward lean should you have at address? Forward lean. You mean like with your body? It really depends on the club and your body makeup. There's no set angle that everyone has to be at. So some people have shorter legs, longer torso, and vice versa. The best way that I'd recommend just kind of setting up is we want to just basically stand up straight here initially. Let your arms relax, just kind of let them hang down. And then what you're going to do is you're just going to push your hips back and your chest forward until your hands get roughly, 5 inches or so, about a fist width in front of your thighs. And then from there, you're just going to get a little bit of flex in your knees to put your knees right over the balls of your feet. And that's going to be a good angle for most people, right in that area right there. Now, because the clubs are different lengths, people's arms are different lengths, people's torsos are different lengths, there's no set angle for where you need to be. But that's going to be a good starting point for most people. Now, with the driver, you're going to be reaching out a little bit, right? Because it's a longer club. If I imagine my driver is this long, right? That's that's going to put me more like this. So this would be a wedge, and then this would be a driver. All right. So Ingo S says, So Ingo S says, what point in the downswing to get your right shoulder down? Right at the beginning of the downswing. So I'm here. When I'm starting my downswing, my right shoulder is going to move down. All right. So as soon as that club's starting to switch directions, that shoulder's got to start moving down. So it's right in the start of the downswing. Brian B says, yes, I didn't write that correctly. You answered it. Push off trail foot. Larry R says, shaft lean toward target. It's not going to be any different for a left-hander than it is for a right-hander. But you still want to release that club about 45 degrees out in front, like we talked about in the straight line release course. It's no different whether you're right-handed or left-handed. Your average tour player is going to take about 30% of the loft off of the club, and that's on average. So not all tour players are releasing it 45 degrees. They're all around there. They're all in that 30 some to 50 degree range. They're somewhere in between there. I think the average is like 40, 41, something like that when we measured. But like I said, it's about 30% of the loss. So let's say you have a pitching wedge, right? A pitching wedge is going to be around 46, 48 degrees, somewhere in there. 30% of the loft is going to be around 14, 13 degrees. So that's about how much shaft lean you're getting there. With the driver, right? Your driver is going to be, 9 degrees, 10 degrees, right? So 30% of that might be 3% or 3 degrees. So they might have 3 degrees of shaft lean with a driver. So it changes from club to club, but in general, on average, it's about 30% of the loft is going to be leaned forward for your average tour player. All right. So thanks everybody for joining me. We'll be back here Monday, 5 p.m. Eastern time. Everybody have a good weekend, and I will talk to you next time.